I mean, I'd tell people if they have the means to do it, like we have an expression in real estate, the best time to buy real estate was yesterday.
Continue.
Oh, so yeah, the motorcycle riding, I've ridden a long time. And one of my friends is an incredibly good rider. He does track days and touring. Like we tour to Texas I've ridden to Florida and all sorts of banana stuff. But when I went to this Yamaha champ school, it's a group of like maybe 20 students and then maybe 10 to 15 coaches. And the coaches are like semi-pro riders or pro riders, or they're just obsessed. So like when you get there, it's like you're just in the motorcycle world for a couple days. You do classroom work, you do riding technique, and like I had to unlearn how to brake even and like how to corner. And once they got me the right way, their way, I guess their way for me is the right way, it increased my riding and also my safety. Like,
do you ride on the street as well?
I do, yeah. So like I have right now I have a Ducati Multistrada, which is a touring bike, but it's bananas. It's got 165 horsepower. There's different modes on it. So it's got an electronic suspension, so it'll change from sport mode to off-road mode to touring mode. You've got 2 people and luggage on it. So it's like it's kind of an all-in-one bike. And I've had friends take them actually on the track. And I did too, that Yamaha Champ School I told you about. I did it at Laguna Seca in Monterey. So I rode my Ducati out there. It was awesome. I went with 2 other guys. Then I did a course, but I rented a Yamaha track bike for the actual course. And one of the days I asked the guys, the coaches, I was like, can I take my Ducati on the track? And they're like, yeah, let our staff just take a quick look at it to make sure it's safe, because they take safety super seriously. If you don't listen to them, they'll throw you out in 2 minutes. So we changed some tire pressure because I had it for touring and luggage. And I went out there and I took my touring bike on the track, which was pretty fun.
Have you done Speed Vegas with cars?
I did it on Wednesday. I went literally last Wednesday. Yeah, it was my buddy's birthday, and we're trying to think of an idea for him to do, like kind of a guy's night. And so me and 3 buddies went out there and we did a couple of routines. I did the Aston Martin.
What gives you more of a thrill, bikes or cars?
That's a funny question. Your timing on the question is very good. I just bought
Are you going back and forth between the two?
No, I literally bought a sports car like Saturday.
What'd you get?
911.
A Porsche 911?
Yeah, Porsche 911. But I always like to hunt for deals. So I was on the internet looking, and I found this one on Facebook Marketplace, and I couldn't understand like why it was priced at where it was at. And then I met the person who sold it to me, and like there's just a little bit of a cultural and a language barrier. So when I saw it, I was like, hey, we need to go to Porsche and get this thing checked out. And then we negotiated a deal, and I bought it like that day. So it's like a Saturday adventure.
What inspired you to get the Porsche?
Actually, I've been thinking about it for a while, but Speed Vegas, after driving, I drove an Aston Martin. I drove it. I was like, dude, this is really fun. I get why people like these cars.
Yeah.
And then I didn't even test drive the car. I just went and looked at it, and the mechanic, like Porsche, looked at it. It was like, dude, the car's perfect. It's still under warranty. And I was like, all right, let's just buy one.
Do you envision taking that one to the track or to a track?
I haven't thought that far about it yet. I think it'd be fun. Yeah, why not? I mean, if they let you, one of my buddies, he's a contractor here in town. He's got a bunch of Porsches, and he goes out to Prump. They have track days.
So not Speed Vegas, another company or another location, you could take it?
I think Speed Vegas is only their cars and their instructors, because it's kind of more of a tourist thing.
Right.
Prump has a private track where they actually have motorcycle days. So if you have a track bike, you can go out there and ride your track bike. And then also they do car days out there. They have a Corvette experience out there too. I haven't done it, but they have like 40 or 50 Corvettes out there, and they teach you how to like race them and drive them.
Was this something that you start off like real young, like your dad taught you, or is it something like recently, like a recent hobby you picked up?
No, motorcycles I actually got into because of real estate. My original broker, who was like my mentor, I met in college, and he had a bunch of motorcycles, and I was like, that looks fun. And that's where I started it. But the passion definitely progressed as I met really cool people, especially in the real estate industry. There's some amazing like baller developers and brokers that ride. And like I had a Yamaha FJR touring bike, which is a phenomenal bike. And I was never invited into the club until like I got the Ducatis. But then having those conversations has actually ended up being a really big like networking and learning tool, because it's like when you're doing a multiple day tour and you stop to get gas, those conversations that kind of take place from there are better than any college class I ever took.
What inspired you to get in real estate in the first place?
I needed a job while I was in college, and I met a broker, and I was his assistant while I was in college. So I just needed money to pay for school, and I never thought I'd do it as a career, but yeah, I've been doing it for 20 years now.
I realized that, but specifically, like you niched down to commercial real estate rather than residential, from what I understood.
Yeah, so if you're in a market that's big enough, like Vegas, like Las Vegas, and it gets even more specific when you're in bigger markets. So when you break down real estate, you have residential agents, and they even get specific as far as like, do they do luxury? Or like I have a buddy, he does residential real estate, and he only does Summerlin, which if you're not in Las Vegas, that's like a suburb of town. It's the west side of town. He only does that pocket. So like more specific you can get, the better. So I primarily do industrial for family offices and like high net worth people. Like that's my niche. I don't deal a lot with like big companies, meaning like there's big investment companies that own a lot of commercial real estate with asset asset managers and that sort of thing. I mostly deal with like high net worth people or family offices, and I help them sell and manage their assets.
And this is industrial size buildings that you're really doing. Like when I follow you on Instagram, I'm seeing you tour warehouses versus when I understand commercial, you can be like 4 locations and up, right? Or 4, what is commercial when it comes down to residential is 4 units and up?
So that's multifamily. Which is, so there's like, this is, so
I heard it too, like commercial is multifamily plus.
This has been my world for like 20 years. So if I'm rattling this off and people, it's kind of hard to keep up, but explaining it to people, the commercial is, the way I describe it, is anything you can put a business into. And then you have the multifamily, which is also commercial. But yeah, if you have like a 3-plex or a 4-plex, like 4 units, yeah, I mean, that's already multifamily, which is, I would say, is a category in commercial because you have investment brokers that sell those. So there's brokers who literally only sell investment multifamily stuff. So all they do is sell apartment complexes, and that could vary in size.
But you stay away from that.
I don't do that. If I get a lead on that, I'll refer it out. So I've done in my career, I mean, I've done ground up retail, meaning it's dirt and somebody comes up with a site plan, and then we ended up putting in like a Del Taco and a Dairy Queen and like a dry cleaner and that. And you usually lease those before you start construction because they tailor those kind of drive-through pads. So you see a Starbucks that gets built on a corner. That lease was signed way before that building got built. But I primarily do industrial warehouse.
Even down to the plans of the location was already planned out before?
Yeah, absolutely. So like they just built, I live in the south end of Vegas, and they put a Dutch Brothers and a Starbucks literally right next to each other on the same side of the street. So when they built those, somebody bought that land, and they probably had a couple different plans to it, and different retail industrial brokers probably called them, or the owner of the land had hired a broker to market the site, and then they played with a couple different, scenarios. Should we do a 3 or 4 unit retail center? Should we do a Starbucks or a McDonald's or whatever's missing in that area? Even though there's 2 other Starbucks within a mile of that area, they still put one in there. So that gets marketed way before they start construction.
So they market it. When do you come in on the deal?
So what I do specifically is, if let's say you want to buy an investment on the industrial side, I'll help you find an income producing industrial building, or find something that's like, we call it value add, that's like kind of run down or vacant, and you buy it, fix it up, rent it out, and then you either maximize the cash flow or you sell it down the road kind of as like a flip.
So, I mean, when I go to YouTube University, there's so much content about doing it on the residential side.
Yeah.
Now, on the commercial side, in your world, what's the pros and cons of one or the other?
I wouldn't say there's a pro or a con, but don't hold me to these numbers. Somebody told me these the other day. They Googled how many commercial agents there are in the country and how many like realtors there are. And the realtors is an association. There's probably more actual residential real estate agents. So you can be a real estate agent, which is a license by the state, and then you join as a realtor, which is like an association you pay to be part of. There were 3.5 million realtors and only 150,000 commercial agents in the country. So it's a lot smaller of a group. So the big difference is, when you're doing residential, 99% of the people you're dealing with are people that are looking for a home to live with their family.
Yeah.
They have whatever job they do, and that person is helping them find a home. So they're going through school districts, or like, is there a park nearby, or whatever's important to them. If they like riding side-by-sides, is there a dirt trail that you can ride, which is a big deal here in Nevada. But commercial, we're predominantly helping, is really business. Like, there's very little small talk. Nobody cares really about, what you're doing on the weekends and that kind of thing. So it's more of a 9 to 5, even though I'm like 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. kind of situation. You're dealing with businesses or investors, so it's a lot more straightforward. So I like to say we're kind of like in the same category as if you're like a business attorney or a business accountant. Like, as your career progresses, you get clients you're like a strategic partner, and you help them like figure out their investment goals.
So if someone says, hey, look, Eric, man, I got an extra $1 million I want to put into something that's going to produce a return, that's going to yield a return, and they have the option to either invest it with you. Now, they're looking to be as passive as possible.
Sure.
They have the option to invest it with you in commercial real estate or invest it in residential. But their thought process is there's always going to be a need for somewhere to live, or for people to live somewhere. Whereas commercial, with what happened during the COVID pandemic, or businesses going offline or going online and spending more time online, what do you communicate to that person to show them the value of investing in commercial?
Well, even during COVID, I mean, there were certain states or municipalities that signed like non-eviction, I don't even know what you would call them, non-eviction notices for like, I think in San Francisco, the mayor literally did it, like an executive order that was like, hey, you cannot pay rent
and still live in the property.
And what's really messed up about that is everybody thinks that these residential landlords are these big billionaire investors that live, on their yacht in the Mediterranean. And a lot of times it's somebody who just took 30 years to invest. I mean, I'll give you an example. I used to be married. My mother-in-law at the time, she had 2 rental properties, and she took like 25 years to build those up and buy them and that kind of thing. So if that rent, fortunately she was smart with money. So like she planned for it, but like it wasn't some $1 billion company. It was like, it was a retired woman, and that was part of her retirement was that income. And so there's this perception that, all these landlords are these big, Donald, what's that duck, the Scrooge McDuck, like billionaires. And it's just not the case. But the thing about commercial is we'll call them coupon clippers, which is like, let's say a Starbucks is the big example. You can buy a Starbucks and they have a 20-year lease on it, and it's called a true triple net lease, which means they pay for the operating expenses. So like sound of mind, meaning you have a credit tenant, like a Starbucks.
Yeah.
They don't pick locations by accident. They put a lot of homework into where they go. And typically they pay their rent on time. They take care of the building, and you're just going to get a check for 20 years.
Why wouldn't they just buy it themselves?
It's not their business model. I know the McDonald's movie, they talk about that the whole strategy is own the real estate, but they don't do that. They sell $7 lattes. There's plenty of margin in that. So I don't know if Starbucks owning any of their own real estate.
But does McDonald's still?
I think the franchisees do it. So like, there might be somebody here in Las Vegas who owns a territory, and I'm assuming they've got 20 or 30 McDonald's. They have the option to buy their real estate. I bet you it's a mixture. I think there's 2 people that own the majority of the McDonald's franchises, like in Southern Nevada, and it's a mixture of them renting and owning. Now, if they can get the plot of land and build a McDonald's and put their business in it, that's going to just increase the value of that site tremendously. But if there's a location and somebody owns it and they don't want to sell it, and the McDonald's wants to go there, they're going to rent the site because the business obviously makes money too.
So from what you said, like from what I understood earlier, is that you work with investors who are looking for income producing properties already.
Or if you run a business and you need to be in an industrial building. So say you run a plumbing company and you need 10,000 square feet for your admin staff and place to store your trucks at nighttime. Like we work with you too to find the right location, because it's all kind of reciprocal, meaning, if I find somebody like a good local plumbing company to rent a building and there's a good lease on that, I'm then going to try to get that owner to sell that building, because the value typically goes up if the building was vacant and we put a good lease in there.
In your group of clients, is it more investors or is it more people who are looking for their own location to rent out of?
It's a mix, but I'd probably say 70% investors and 30% owner users is what we call it. So people who buy it to use it themselves.
And then those investors, are they buying up multiple properties, or is it just one and done, or is it 2 and done?
It depends on the person, but who I work with, they do multiple ones. Like there's one guy I sold 6 buildings to last year.
If someone is looking, let's just use the Starbucks scenario. If someone's looking to get into owning a Starbucks, the actual land itself or the location, how much would they need to come out of pocket? And then what's the return look like?
So a company like Starbucks, your rate of return is going to be a lot less than higher credit the tenant, more stable it is, the less like ROI you're going to get on it. So the cap rate, we call it a cap rate, which is simply the rate of return that you're getting on the building. I mean, I've seen them as low as 4% and as much as like 8%. And that just depends on where interest rates are at, where the location's at, because if it's like on the Las Vegas Strip, your rate of return is probably going to be less and you're going to be paying a lot more money, but you're buying sound of mind because it's at a prime location that's going to be super busy. You're always going to be able to find a tenant on the Las Vegas Strip versus, let's say, one that's, I'm just making this up, in Prump, that's kind of in the hidden a little bit. If that Starbucks might sign a 10 or 20-year lease, but maybe a new shopping center gets built
right next door.
Yeah, right next door, and Starbucks says, you know what, I'd rather just pay to break the lease and move across the street, which has happened. So like sometimes the tenants are like, hey, you might need to sue me, or there's a break fee or something in the lease. So nothing's secure totally, but I personally like
they take that into conversation, like, hey, look, based on what our business strategy is, you might need to sue me and we'll take it to court.
No, they'll typically work something out with you. Okay. But like, though, if they need to break a lease, they typically work something out, because getting into a lawsuit typically costs a lot more than just having a conversation and figuring it out. But if you can't agree, yeah, I mean,
what's a realistic number for someone to have in the bank to say, hey, I want to own a Starbucks? Give or take. And I know like locations vary.
Sure. I mean, that's probably anywhere from like $500,000 to like $1.5 million, depending on where it's at.
So if they put in $500,000, what is going to be the total buy price
on something like that? So on an investment like that with a credit tenant, you're probably going to need 30 to 40% as a down payment.
Okay.
But again,
is that $500,000 going down towards the 30%?
100%.
Okay.
Going to that. So you'll get, and again, it's the first rule of getting a loan is proving you don't need a loan. So if you've got plenty of money in the bank and you've got a banking history with that financial institution, you get a lot more favorable loans. Some of the loans I've seen written for people are just crazy. Like I forget the exact name what they did, but it was a guy, he had a very healthy stock portfolio, and his banker called me and said, hey, we're just going to write him a personal check and we're using part of his stock portfolio as collateral. It was like $7 million. And essentially his stocks were the collateral. So in the event the stock went down below the amount that he got the loan or some sort of ratio, they just took the stock and sold it off. But his portfolio was so big, like the world would have ended had that gone down that
Isn't
much.
that how billionaires are able to live tax-free with that strategy?
Well, so I'm not a tax expert. That's always my disclaimer here.
Disclaimer,
Not a tax lawyer. But yeah, I see it happen all the time. People own buildings that are free and clear, or they've got minimal debt on it, and they carry a line of credit on it. So they can just pick up the phone, call a bank, and they're just borrowing against an asset, and it's a loan, and then they'll buy another asset with it, and then they just pay that back when they get the other one figured out. I had to do a deal, which I'm not going to talk about this deal because it was a quick deal, and somebody needed a lot of cash really quickly, and it turns out he just had a line of credit against another building, so the bank literally had the money in his bank account in 48 hours, and it was like millions of dollars because we had to do a really quick close. I just don't want to mention the deal because it'll give it away.
So for less than $2 million, I'm thinking of a scenario. For less than $2 million, someone could get in and own the location of a Starbucks.
Yeah.
Per se.
Yeah.
Per se. We're not holding you to it. Just so
Yeah,
that we
absolutely.
can theorize, right?
100%. And also there's other, like, I call it neighborhood shopping centers. And we're talking a lot about retail, which isn't my forte, but it's just, everybody goes to some sort of retail store and not everybody goes to an industrial building.
Yeah.
But I mean, some of those neighborhood retail stores that look like they've got like a check cashing place and a smoke shop and a rim store down the street, and like a Cricket place, like a Cricket cell phone dealer.
Yep.
Some of those things crush it. I've seen rate of returns on those, 10 to 15%, or they've owned it for a long time. And you just need to be the right operator to do it. Maybe you need a certain language skill but those tenants aren't credit tenants. It's just like some person or a family that started a business.
Yeah.
We call it owning a job. Like they buy a Cricket franchise and they work there every day, 9 to 6 or whatever. Some of those kind of, like we'll call them nitty gritty shopping centers, those produce a much higher rate of return than like the credit tenant ones. But again, you're trading ease for management. So how valuable is your time? So I've seen people get those really hectic shopping centers and put their sweat and hard work into it, get good tenants, clean it up, put a new roof on it, parking lot, and then it's really management intensive, and then they sell it, and then they trade into something like the Starbucks where it's like, I just get a rent check every month and I don't need to go down there and fight with the guy for the $2,000 rent check every day.
Give or take, if I put in, let's say I put in the $500,000, and by the way, we're not holding you to it. This just allows me to conceptualize commercial real estate. If I put $500,000 into it, what could a tenant like Starbucks or Chick-fil-A or Dutch Bros or any of those companies pay monthly for a small location that has a drive-through in it?
Like
with some
your rate of
parking lots?
return or the rent?
The rent itself.
Oh man, I mean, I saw one that was the guy, they were paying almost $20,000 a month for a Dutch Brothers, and a Dutch Brothers is tiny. I mean, the building itself
it's
is
really
tiny.
small. Yeah.
So that's the other thing. You better get a secure operator, because if they leave, you have a shed with a drive-through. But Dutch Brothers,
And it's very specific to that business.
we call it a build to suit. You're building, you own the land, you build the building to suit that tenant. So you're building it for Dutch Brothers. Like I said, there's one in the south part of Vegas where I live. There's literally a Dutch Brothers and a Starbucks right next to each other. I'm like, why would you? But there's lines in all of them. Anyways, the rate of return, you right now in today's market, you're probably right under 5%, right, hovering plus or minus 5%. Your rate of return a couple of years ago was like 7%. That the demand and interest rates will determine, what that is. But I mean, those can be anywhere from, I'd say, $15,000 to $20,000 a month in rent.
Would you suggest a first-time investor to invest into a property that could be rented out to a Dutch Bros, Chick-fil-A, like one of those companies?
It depends what your goal is. I mean, it literally is like, what's your investment goal? If you're
Passive income.
Yeah, if you're a professional and you're making
first time.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're a professional, let's say, make it up here, you're a lawyer.
Okay,
And you're busy with your job, but you're making enough money to buy an asset like that. Yeah, that's a great way to go, because you don't need to manage it yourself. Your rate of return might not be the highest, but you've got money locked up in a credit tenant. They're paying rent on time, and that rent, if you're getting cash flow positive, you get that extra income, or you can throw it towards the mortgage of the building. It's a great way to go if you have the income to do it. Most first-time investors, though, will typically buy something that is a non-credit tenant, a smaller industrial building or a smaller retail building, and go into that, because you can find those for $1 million, and you might be able to get something that's seller financing. So the seller is essentially your bank for a couple of years, or you have your own business. This is a very big play. So we mentioned a cell phone store. Say say you own a cricket franchise.
You know what's interesting about the cricket?
What?
I was one of the first 10 people or franchisees that they offered on the Northeast to open up Cricket Wireless when AT&T acquired them in 2013.
Did it really?
Yeah, they brought me into New York City. They brought me to the top. Their executive team, because I ran Metro PCS stores.
Okay.
And then they were out scouting, and I happened to be at one of the locations, and they said, come on into New York. And then I sat down with them. And
Didn't go anywhere?
They offered me the money to build out the stores, but I moved to the West Coast.
Perfect.
And I left that territory.
That's a perfect. So you're familiar with then the concept of Metro PCS and Cricket. They're essentially franchises. You get a territory. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's say I had a 4,000 square foot retail building on an area that there wasn't a Metro PCS or Cricket store, and you own that franchise. You could go buy that building and put your own business in it, and the bank is going to be more favorable to you because you're going to be in there operating your own business. So there's already a tenant in there, meaning you. And there's another program called an SBA loan. So I've seen this done countless times. So with an SBA loan, if you go buy a building, you have to be in business for at least 2 years, occupy over half of the building. So it's 51% of the building at least. And you have to be using it yourself. So let's say you found a 4,000 foot building, you use 2,100 square feet for your own business, and you rented out the other half. You're in commercial real estate. You're an investor now. But with an SBA loan, you can do a loan as little as 10% down. So I've seen this countless times. Somebody goes in, they buy a building to run their own business in, and they use an SBA loan, and they try to get a multi-tenant building. So the example I just used, you have a 4,000 foot building, your business is in half of it, and you rent out the other half. And then as that mortgage gets paid down, you go refinance it, take that money, and you put it into another building. So that's if you're buying a $1 million building, it's a lot easier to come up with $100,000 than $400,000. So there's really good programs where you're kind of like you own your company and you also own your building. We're over kind of by the airport right now. I sold a building about 2 years ago. It was about a 20,000 foot industrial building. This couple, they ran a business. They were never into real estate, but they ran a business that paid the building off over 20 years. So they paid the building literally off for 20 years, and they thought their business was going to be worth millions of dollars, but the value in their business was them. And when they retired, they realized their business was not worth as much as they thought it was. It was a fraction of it. But when I went and told them how much their building was worth, I was like, why don't you just rent this building out? You're going to make $20,000 a month. And they're like, we don't want to be landlords. So we ended up selling it, and they made almost $4 million. But what happened is their business paid off the mortgage. The business wasn't worth that much. They were the value of the business, but they were retiring because they had all the connections and knew what. But the business paid the property off, and then they sold the building, and that $4 million was their retirement.
You know what? Now that you say that, it actually opens up my eyes to something, because one of my stores that I opened up at Metro PCS, it's still open today. And that property itself, it used to be a Subway, and they did build to suit. So they changed up the colors, they changed up the flooring, they changed up everything within T-Mobile specs. Mm-hmm. And that property is still open today. I could have technically been getting paid by the tenant, which is a cell phone store. When I let that cell phone store go back to T-Mobile, I could have technically been getting paid by the tenant based on what you're saying.
Yeah.
I got to technically own that property, because they're not in the world of real estate. But now, what happens if you build to suit, you're the tenant, you put down $500,000 in the deal, you built a suit, and you got a loan for the suit in the first place, and then tenant says, hey, within 2 years, they're like, hey, look, they go
out of business.
I got a jet or move, and you haven't even got paid back on your build out in the first place.
It's a normal foreclosure process.
Has it happened before?
Oh yeah, we're absolutely. I mean, there's a risk involved. I mean, things happen. I mean, look at Circuit City. Nobody would have thought Circuit City would have gone out of business. They had hundreds of locations throughout the country.
True.
Who else is Kmart still around? I don't even know. But there's the Sears. Sears is gone, right?
Yeah.
Like, who would have thought Sears is gone? Like, these massive tenants, they get poor leadership or like COVID. I mean, companies aren't here anymore. COVID put under. I mean, I can't name any offhand.
So you need to really go into understand the business itself rather than just the fact that it's a big business. You really need to see the future of the business as if you're an investor in their stock.
Yeah. I mean, over time, I could name examples of clients. I have one who just passed away, unfortunately, but the dude was like 100. I think he owned about 60 properties between here and Utah. And he started out as a car mechanic. And his rule was just like, if the property next door to something I own was available, I'd just buy it. I'd do my best to buy it. Okay. So he owned a house and the house next door became available. He'd just buy it. And over 60 years, he built this massive portfolio. I mean, his great grandkids don't have to work because he owns so much real estate.
Yeah.
But there's a risk involved in anything. Personally, because I'm in my 30s, I do a lot of work. I like getting things that are a little, because I'm in the industry, I like to get things that are a little more risky. So a lot of the properties we have might have a mix of credit tenants. It might have 10 units and 3 or 4 of them are credit national tenants and the other ones are kind of more mom and pop. I like that mixture because you've got the security of the big ones, but those guys sign long leases, meaning a Smith's grocery store, Albertsons, they sign really long leases. And you might shoot yourself in the foot and not sign a high enough rate. And in 10 years, they're paying half of what the market is versus like the mom and pop shops, they sign like 3 to 5 year leases. So you're able to kind of offset that long lease with the shorter lease by correcting those leases every 3 or 5 years.
Do you advise or highly advise, whatever the opposite is, when someone says, hey, I want to go into commercial, but I also want to do residential? Is it just completely two different strategies? Don't get involved and choose one or the other? Or do you say, yes, diversify between the two?
Do you mean as an investor or as a real estate broker?
As an investor.
Absolutely. You can diversify. I've got one client, he owns, I think I've sold him 4 industrial buildings, and I don't know how many houses. I don't know how many houses he owns because I don't do residential, but I referred him to a residential agent and she sold him probably 3 or 4 houses. So he just, when he makes some money, he looks for deals and he buys them, or the agents bring him deals. So I bring him deals, and if he likes it, he buys it. So I think diversifying is great. I mean, me personally, I have residential and commercial in my own portfolio as an investor. And I mean, even in like stocks, I'm the same way. Like I have like a money manager, and then I do a little bit myself, and I love mutual funds. So like, I know the big rule is you can throw more money into one asset and the reward could be a lot more because it pops up. Had I taken all my money and put it in Bitcoin 10 years ago, like I would have made way more money, but it also could have been nothing. So like I'm a little more conservative. So if you have the means to do it, diversify totally. Like absolutely, I'll tell you to do both.
The SBA loan that you mentioned earlier, is that essentially kind of equivalent to like an FHA loan on residential?
Yeah, it's a program to help a startup business. The same way as a first-time homeowner's loan, the FHA loan, is to help somebody buy a house. Because I think I've seen FHA loans as low as 3%, which, that's a nominal amount to save up. And if you're a business owner, those SBA loans are huge because they can help you with equipment and your building. So like, let's say, again, I use the plumbing company as an example. They need to buy a building. They need to buy work trucks or vans or whatever they use, tools, that kind of stuff. So you can actually get an SBA loan to help you with equipment and the building. So I think it's a great program to get into a building.
Because of so if we look at cap rate or rate of return, if I were to put $500,000 into residential, but there's more residential, I'm assuming there's more residential square footage in America than commercial.
Oh, significantly more.
If I were, because of that, does that mean that the revenue per house is less than the revenue per building on commercial? Do you get a bigger rate of return on commercial rather than residential?
If you're an investor, so let's say you have a day job. So let's use it as a lawyer as an example, and you're investing in residential or in commercial. I think it's probably going to be within the same, a couple plus or minus, 1 or 2 percentage points. So if let's say we call it a 7 cap on commercial property, you're probably going to get about the same on a residential. But you make your money on the buy. So the thing is like, who's bringing you deals and who's in it. So that's why, like, I just did a deal where we're getting a 15% rate of return. But it's my business. I mean, I eat, breathe, and live industrial buildings in Las Vegas. You can't throw a baseball at a building where I don't know who the owner is or the leasing agent, or I've probably put a tenant in there. So like, I know we call it kind of shooting from the hip kind of stuff. I sold some buildings in a really not great part of town last year, and we're like, the guy who bought it is going to double his money on them in like a 18-month period. It's crazy
because he bought it low and he's selling it.
Yeah, he knew what to do. They were buildings that were totally vandalized. They were in a bad part of town. The seller was kind of difficult, but we knew what to do because he's been doing it a long time and I've been doing it a long time. So we had a game plan for it and we had to execute it really quick and take a year to like go through our plan. But our exit's going to be big because we bought them vacant. We're leasing them out to credit tenants and we're selling them to your investor, and they're going to get about a 7% rate of return, which right now in 2025 is really good. So it's kind of working out for everybody.
Take us through the steps, Eric, and tell us when you get involved. I got $500,000 in the bank and I want to invest that $500,000 and I want to start getting, I want to get a tenant that's similar to the Starbucks, similar to Chick-fil-A or whatever, that I can damn near guarantee that I'm going to get paid. Now, understanding what we talked about earlier. But take us through the steps. I got $500,000. What do I do next? I want to play the real estate game.
Well, if you're going to buy a Starbucks or a credit tenant or a Chick-fil-A and you only have $500,000, you better go find some more money because it's going to cost you a lot more. But let's say right now you and I were sitting down and you said, hey, I want to buy a commercial building with a tenant in it and I've got $500,000 to invest. What can we look at? I'm going to sit down with you and I'm going to come up with, I'm going to go over some, because it's my specialty, industrial. I'm going to show you some certain parts of town. I'm going to show you some examples of deals we've sold that were like $1 million, kind of what to expect with a tenant, mix. I want to give you a real vision of what it's going to be like to own that, because if you've never done it before, there's a lot of unknowns. And if I sell you something you hate, you're never going to want to work with me again because you're going to associate me with that property that you don't like. So I want to give you a realistic vision of what that's going to be, the good and the bad. And we'll just essentially figure out like what your risk tolerance is and, you know, how soon you want to spend it. And then we'll just start looking for deals. A lot of times something gets, like when you come to me and you say, I want to buy an investment industrial building, there might not be anything on the market. Like there's very little inventory on the market right now, even with all the tariff stuff going on. You know, we're in May of 25. In Las Vegas right now, to buy an industrial building under 10,000 square feet, there's very limited inventory. But to get back to your question, you and I would sit down and go over your risk tolerance, what you want to buy, and then we'd start looking for deals. And I would also make sure that you are already in contact with a bank, because just because you have $500,000 doesn't mean it's easy to get a loan. So if you use a bank, I just tell you, hey, go to your bank, tell them you're looking to invest this much money. How much can you borrow? This is the asset you're looking for. And they'll like pre-qualify you just like a house. So then when we find a deal, we can write an offer on it. So you and I talk, we find your risk tolerance. You go and talk to your bank. You know how much you can borrow with the $500,000 you have to invest. The next step is we start looking. So let's say we find, we'll just call it ABC Plumbing Company is renting an industrial building and you want to buy it. You and I will sit down, we'll come up with an offer. We'll submit the offer to, I'm assuming it's listed for sale, to the broker with a letter of intent. It's a non-binding sale letter of intent. The buyer or the seller will go over it. If they accept it, we'll do a purchase agreement. And then we go through the escrow process, which is the buyer ties up the property and you get a certain amount, a pre-negotiated amount of time to really comb through the property. We get to read the lease. We get to see what the building condition is, last time the roof was done. If the air conditioning units are 20 years old, we investigate the property. And if there's some issues, we ask for a price increase or a credit or something. If they say no, we have that option to cancel. And, at that point, you'll either buy it or cancel escrow and get your money back. But if you buy it, then you're the owner of it. I know that's a quick run through, but there's a very broad answer. But the short answer is you just figure out your risk tolerance, what your budget is, and then you work with a good real estate broker to figure out, what you're going to buy and have them keep sending you deals.
I wonder what that experience is like right after they sign the paperwork, they put up the money and they finally own it. What is it like?
It's honestly a little surreal because I'll tell you, the first investment property I got involved in, I really didn't have the money to get involved in it, but I did it. And you're kind of it's like it's kind of like a first date. You're you're a little nervous, but you're excited at the same time.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'd tell people if they have the means to do it, we have an expression in real estate. The best time to buy real estate was yesterday. Mm-hmm. And, you see people your grandparents who bought a house in the 70s, they paid $40,000 for it, and they talk about how scary it is. And now it's, depending on where it is, it could be worth $2 million. It's like it's a nervous excitement, but I would encourage anybody who has an interest to do it, to get involved. There's another way of doing it. They're called syndication deals, where you're a limited partner in a project. And those are really exciting because you get to be part of it. You could only have $5,000 and you get to throw the money into a deal, but you're part of the deal. You get to be kept up to date. You see the processes, and there's some people who run really good syndications.
Is that a good first start for a first-time investor?
I think it is, but you need to know the group. I mean, unfortunately, and this is in the minority, there are some I don't want to, poor operators, let's call it. So there's some really reputable groups. They could be big companies, they could be smaller. And again, you can put, some of them have minimums of a couple $100,000, but some of them don't. And the reason they don't have minimums is, let's say you and I are syndicating a deal. I found a deal and I'm like, hey, dude, we need to buy this thing. Let's get some investors. And we get 100 investors. Well, that's fine, because if you get all those people involved with you, they start looking for deals. So an agent who's maybe 22 years old and has no money and is living in his mom's garage, he's hungry. And if he has a couple $1,000 to put into that deal, now he's partners with you. You have a relationship, and you might be the 95% owner and he's, minimal. You're like, hey, bring me another deal. We'll do it again. You can be as involved or as not. You can just get a commission on it, or if you want to throw some money in the deal or throw your fee into the deal, so meaning the sales commission. Those agents get super excited because they're like, oh, dude, this guy's going to let me be partners with them. So if you don't have minimums and you're syndicating like that, they're out hunting for deals. Hey, this guy's going to let me be a partner and I'm going to get a commission. And that's how you find really good deals sometimes, because when you have agents just scouring the market, it's pretty cool to see. And as time goes on, they get more money. I mean, that's how I got involved. I mean, some of the buildings that I was a percentage or a partner in, and if you had to cut up the building material, I probably owned some rocks in the landscaping, but I was part of it. I was part of that process, and I was connected to them, and we did more deals, and percentages goes up. It's fun. If you're a new real estate agent, that's a really fun way to grow, your experience, is find an investor who will let you invest with them. And the reason I say that is not only your money, but you get to see how they do loans, how they handle their money, how they do insurance. You get to see how they operate. And some of these guys have 30 years of experience and are worth insane amounts of money, and you can learn more from them in that 2-year period. Like, be attached to their hip. It's pretty crazy.
You know, one of the things as we wrap up, one of the things that I noticed from you is that mentorship is key, it sounds like. And I see some of the people that you're mentoring on your social media. But what is your journey with mentorship in the real estate game?
Man, short answer is when I got into this, I had a really cool guy who I worked for while I was in college who introduced me to a lot of people, and he was great at talking in sales, but that was pre-2008. So anything you had for sale was getting bought up. But whatever you're doing in life, especially commercial real estate, you need to get onto a team with somebody who wants to genuinely see you do well and grow. And the more money you make, the more money they make. But they need to be talking to you on a weekly basis as far as like, hey, you did a good job here, you did a poor job here. Sit down with goals, like personal goals and professional goals. Like, come up with a plan. And if you're not on a team or at a company that they genuinely have your benefit at heart, you need to go somewhere else. And I would tell you to not only be in an office that way, but have a mentor that's maybe not in your company you meet with once a week or every 2 weeks. I have one. He's actually at a competing company on a competing team. And we talk all the time because he's been doing it for 30 years. And that has gotten me more information than, any deal I've worked on. Well, not any deal, but I'm learning from his mistakes, I guess is the point. So yeah, get a mentor, get proximity is a huge deal. Get around people who are doing what you're doing. Like, I was in Newport Beach this weekend with one of my friends who's one of the sharpest business people I've come across. Like, he just sees the board differently. And having the conversations, we went to the Newport Beach Yacht Club or yacht show, and we're walking around the docks and just having conversations about what he's doing with money. I'm like, I didn't even think of that. And like, I'm doing some things now that I think I'm going to make some money with. I would have never had that had I not gone and hung out with my friend who is a very savvy business guy. So like, just social setting, professional setting, just get around people better than you. But my main thing is if you're trying to grow in your career, get around a team who wants to help you grow in your career.
If someone, as we wrap up, if someone is at that stage where they're like, hey, look, I got the money, I want to invest, and I want to specifically invest in Las Vegas. Ironically, I'm listening to this podcast. Eric, how do people get in touch with you?
I'm on all the social media platforms. My name, it's at Eric T. Sexton, Eric with a K. You can also just Google my name, Eric Sexton. I'll pop up on Google. Easiest ways to get a hold of me are just Instagram at Eric T. Sexton.
Eric, thank you so much for
being on
the Audate show.